Hi, I'm Bram, and I recently finished playing Dishonored, a game set against the background of an all-consuming plague, in the middle of an all-consuming worldwide plague. As you might expect, some of this game's story elements hit differently in 2022 than they presumably would have in 2012 when this game first came out.
For those of us in the global northwest, including the French developers at Arcane Studios, deadly pandemics used to be more of a theoretical possibility, something that only happened to past generations or people from other continents, something our sense of Western superiority would surely protect us from. Had I played this game on release day, I probably would have had a very different experience than I did now, as someone who has now lived through a worldwide pandemic himself, or rather is living through it because COVID didn't die out when we just sort of decided that it was over.
So I thought it would be interesting to take stock of how the worldwide coronavirus pandemic has affected the experience of playing this game. How did Dishonored age in light of COVID-19?
When I first booted up the game and saw the title screen, I already felt a bit firm in my stomach. I was greeted by a giant, terrifying electrical gate with a large sign above it reading, "The boldest measures are the safest." Oh no, I thought. This game is probably aged like vinegar. I was afraid the Red Plague would be used as a tool of authoritarian oppressors in a way that would directly tie into anti-vaxx, plandemic conspiracy theories. And even though I ended up quite liking this game, I have to admit, I wasn't exactly wrong in my suspicions. Before we dive in, I feel like I should make it clear that I'm not really interested in placing blame on this game. The developers of this game can't necessarily help it if their game ages a little poorly, or even if it helped embolden conspiracy theories that they could never have expected would come into existence almost a decade later. And spoiler alert, I don't think they did that. I don't think this game in particular had any effect on any real-world conspiracy theorists' belief about COVID. I just think it's interesting to know the parallels here. Alright? Alright. Let's start with the big one. The Red Plague in Dishonored did not occur naturally. It was deliberately imported by the spymaster of the city of Dunwall as a way to cull the poor, whom he sees as an idle drain on resources. Quarantines are implemented not to keep the poor safe, but to make sure it's only the poor who die of the plague, to make sure that it doesn't spread to the aristocrats. Guards are ordered to kill the sick on sight for that very reason, to protect the elite, so to speak. Both the Red Plague itself and the measures implemented as a result of it are tools to violently reshape society in favor of those at the top, which is an unfortunate mirror to some real-world COVID conspiracies. Perhaps you've heard the term the Great Reset bandied about over the past 2 years. The Great Reset is the name of an actual book by Klaus Schwab and a political agenda of the World Economic Forum, but it's nothing like the conspiracy theory that carries its name. The conspiracy theory posits that COVID was possibly deliberately introduced into society, like the Red Plague in the game, and definitely abused to overzealously restrict civil rights with the end of creating a new globalist dystopian world order, in which democracy and individuality are erased by a socialist elite, because that's what socialism is. It may also mean that people will be killed through the vaccine as a means of population control, or turn into something post-human, and they may actually make it explicit that they think the cabal doing this is Jewish, because like Flat Earth, QAnon, or the gender-critical cult, the Great Reset is kind of a Big Tent conspiracy theory that agrees on broad strokes, but incorporates many people with different, often conflicting ideas, that more often than not turn out to be reskins of centuries-old anti-Semitic narratives. It's probably clear to you now that when a believer in COVID conspiracies plays this game, they would most likely see all of their most frightful beliefs reflected back at them. A manufactured plague that exists only to cull a perceived surplus population to serve a group of elites, and very bold measures implemented in the name of safety that exist only to harm and control the populace at large. Of course, most actual measures imposed by governments in response to COVID-19 are not very bold, but that's not how conspiracy theorists see it in their head.
In my home country of the Netherlands, for example, our government has consistently done even less than the bare minimum at the cost of thousands upon thousands of lives. But anti-COVID conspiracy theorists here still think that unimaginable injustices are being done to them, to beat them into submission so they'll accept the new world order, even after pretty much all COVID restrictions have been lifted.
I feel like I should point out that the actual Great Reset is the typical empty rhetoric of the World Economic Forum. Distractions, put up to maintain the capitalist status quo. It basically posits that after COVID-19 we'll have to rebuild the world economy anyway, so we might as well do it in a sustainable way. It's conveniently vague on details though. It really just posits that societal and ecological needs should also be considered in economic decision making, with the help of digital innovation mostly. It's basically stakeholder capitalism again, except we'll achieve it by going on the computer. It doesn't actually propose any real reforms to the system or change the balance of power in any way, which makes it unlikely to actually affect any change, and that's exactly the point. It's meant to preserve existing power structures, by distracting from the ongoing decay and the oncoming climate apocalypse caused by unbridled expansionist capitalism, which is to say capitalism, with empty promises of change. The Great Reset platform is bad, and the World Economic Forum is also bad. They're just bad for very different reasons than conspiracy theorists think. I also feel like I should point out that conspiracy theories, even when they're very wrong, usually do reflect real tensions within society, and the same is true here. COVID conspiracy theorists are not wrong to identify that public crises are often used to legitimize erosions of civil liberties and increasingly authoritarian government measures. They're also not wrong to criticize Big Pharma, who do place the profit motive over safety and public health whenever they can get away with it, and who, like all large corporations, do hold a considerable amount of influence over politicians and policy. A main reason for why COVID is never going away, for instance, is that pharmaceutical companies didn't want to distribute their vaccines to places in the world where it wouldn't be profitable to do so, and the politicians in their pockets didn't force them to release the patents so people could produce it themselves in those territories, meaning that the coronavirus has a huge population of unvaccinated people through whom it can keep mutating into more contagious, more deadly, or possibly vaccine-resistant strains, which will keep hurting all of us.
But it's not because some shadowy cabal wants to prime us for a new world order, it's because our governments serve the need of profit-seeking companies above their citizens.
YouTube and Joe Rogan are lying for your money and attention. Most conspiracies are just capitalism.
Spreading far-flung conspiracy theories only diverts the blame away from where it should be placed. Companies are more than happy to let you believe in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories if it means you won't question their enormous, undemocratic position of power over all of us. There's a reason anti-Semitism is often called the socialism of fools.
Okay, so Dishonored unfortunately mirrors some of the harmful fantasies of COVID conspiracy theorists. That makes the game a bit more uncomfortable to play in 2022, but it's not the only way in which it hits differently when you play it now. A lot of the game actually feels strangely relatable post-COVID.
I'm not the first to make this observation. Writing on Games, for instance, made it before me, but the feeling of walking the streets of Dunwall in Dishonored eerily mirrors the feeling I got when walking the streets in the early days of the pandemic. There's something unnerving about seeing all these city streets that are usually full of life, all these buildings and structures that were clearly built for a large number of people, completely abandoned. Both Dunwall and the city streets I was walking in 2020 felt strangely post-apocalyptic in a sense. So that part of the game is much more relatable to someone who's actually seen this happen in real life.
What's more, the game explicitly does not play into anti-vaxx conspiracies. There's actually 2 separate serums in this game, both of which we're told actually work in protecting against infection. In fact, you'll be chugging these remedies to keep your health and magic up throughout the game, and you never keel over as a result of it. Your magic powers don't come from these serums either, you just need one of them to keep your magic meter up, so that nips any parallels to theories about vaccines as a means to unwillingly turn us all into transhumanist experiments in the bud. So, wait. If there are vaccines in the world of Dishonored, why is everyone still getting sick? Well, the reason for that is actually quite similar to the real-world reasons for the same thing happening with COVID. Capitalism. And yes, I am hearing how often I'm saying that word in this video.
Capitalism.
I'm sorry, it's not my fault that our mode of economic distribution is so destructive. Anyway, as I've said before, the reason most people in the world are not getting vaccinated is because it's not profitable enough to distribute the vaccines to certain parts of the world, and governments don't feel inclined to force companies to do so anyway or release their patents because they serve corporate interests above the common interest. This means the virus has more than enough fertile ground to mutate and become harder to fight at the cost of human lives. In the game, it's more profitable to let a few people buy up all the serum they can afford at a high price than to distribute it to the poor. And similarly, the government does not force them to because they share the interests of the wealthy aristocrats, not the poor.
Of course, in the game, the government is actively malignant in its mishandling of the situation, because it's they who introduced the plague specifically to cull the poor, but that makes it even worse that their actual conduct doesn't differ that much from real-world governments. If a government that was actively trying to kill the poor in the global south, and often the domestic working poor as well, whose jobs can't easily be performed from home, would handle vaccine rollouts similarly to how Western governments have managed it during the COVID pandemic, it should make you question whose interest your government really serves.
It's the rich, it's capital. Okay? I'm making sure, because you can't leave the anti-Semites an inch. Alright? Alright.
Again, I want to stress that the devs, or even the game itself, definitely shouldn't be blamed for playing into conspiracy theories that didn't even exist at the time of the game's release. I just think that it's interesting how differently a lot of people will probably experience this game now compared to a decade ago, because of circumstances entirely external to the game. Sort of a nice case study as to how the baggage we take into a work of art, our experiences and our frame of reference, makes a huge difference when it comes to how we perceive and interpret that piece of art. Is the conclusion to this video that it's impossible to objectively experience art and divorce it from our own experience, and that objective criticism is therefore a lie? Sure, why not? That and get vaxxed, I suppose. Get your boosters. Our governments have more or less condemned people with weaker immune systems, so don't put them in any more danger than they already are because it's inconvenient for you to get another shot. Okay, bye.
Thanks for watching this video to the end. It honestly means a lot to me. Now that you're a part of the very select club of people who actually watch these credits, why not express that superiority over other viewers with a comment underneath this video? It would really help me appease the living God at whose mercy I'm at. You could also watch one of the videos on the screen right now, or subscribe to my channel if you want to see what I'll make in the future. Also, ring the ceremonial bell. The algorithm apparently loves it when you do that, and he'll thank you by actually notifying you of my new videos, which a subscription alone for some reason isn't actually guaranteed to do. Thank you.